Well, good afternoon, everybody. Glad to see you here, and I'm glad that most of you stayed so as you can hear this presentation. We're at a super exciting time right now. We've done an awful lot of work the last couple of years, but really a lot of work the last 6 months to a year, and we're prepared to share the status of things and the opportunity that we have before us and some of the details that are our reality that we're going to have to make sure that everybody's comfortable with supporting that. So why we're here today, what we're going to cover is we're going to share the scope of the project and the budget, and that's going to be Larry. We're going to share the need for some hands-on support for different members of the congregation, because there's going to be some things we're going to do ourselves. We're going to share the financial impact and the commitments that we're going to have. We will be having a mortgage of some sort, so we're going to share what we know today. Then we'll respond to questions and some thoughts that you might have. I'm going to close with a closing comment, and then we're going to close with the close of the meeting and the time together with a questionnaire that you have. And it's pretty simple. You support it or don't you? And if you don't support it, we would appreciate knowing just what your thoughts are, so that when we prepare this to present to the voters meeting, that we would have that information, just what people are thinking. So we're going to start with Larry, going over the church project.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. In that handout on the front page, right in the middle, that's the section I'd be working off of the church project, and there's 4 bullet points there. The first one is the state of the situation from the ad hoc committee exploratory work to consideration of the building the new church. Well, if you remember, like 3 years ago, ad hoc committee, was trying to get close to the congregation, get a feel for what they wanted to do, and really about 90% of the congregation really wanted to explore going forward. So from there, we hired an architect and put a floor plan together and elevation drawings and so forth and so on. But with that, I want to just kind of remind you of what it's all about. With the building, there's a function to it. You're trying to get it to function as a tool for what it is you want to do in that building. So what are some of those things that prompted us to go this route? Well, getting for our membership and for our visitors, one elevation, with no steps, having bathrooms close by, okay, have an inviting fellowship area, and next to that is a kitchen that's functional in many ways. Next to that is there's a parent's room, a mother's room that's adjacent to the sanctuary. There's a Bible class room that's kind of a focal point because it is very important in our ministry. That room itself would be used for other things besides just Bible study, maybe funeral luncheons, that kind of thing. There's a sanctuary that's spacious, the right size, the right look as we feel, with AV components in there that are modern and up to date. There's storage for Altar Guild, a workroom for Altar Guild ushers. There's pastors' offices that are close, and the sacristy as well. So the building itself, the whole point of it is to get it to function for what it is you want it to do. Okay, and with that, you want it to stay in a simple. We took a lot of cutesy stuff that architects like to put in that costs a lot of money. We took some of the cutesy stuff out, but yet it still, we feel, looks elegant and timeless in the sense of something it would look good today, as well as 50 years from now when I'm walking into it. Well, maybe not 50, but you want 49. There you go. Thank you. But you want it to look good now and into the future. Okay? So that's my first point. The second bullet point is we chose Delires as a general contractor. They're out of Green Bay and essentially out of Three Lakes as well. They own property here. They've done a lot of projects, a couple of church additions in Three Lakes. They're working on one in Sugar Camp right now. They've done the library right down the street. So they do a lot of commercial work. They have ties to the area. They have subcontractors, local ones that they use a lot. So they're really familiar with our area. Okay, the third bullet point, the cost estimate, $2.9 million. Now know that this includes some non-building items in there, such as raising of the current church, the new storage garage, which would go on this lot, redo of the kitchen to fit, the new floor plan that we would have. So some of these self-managed projects we would hope that and kind of expect that the congregation would help with. Okay, so the 2.9 million, where does that come from? Well, if you look back in our paperwork from 3 years ago, we had estimates from an architect at 2.8, 2.9 million, and then we had a comparable Free Church in Saint Germain was 1.4, so we kind of split the difference. We came up with 2.1. Okay, and then off of that, we tried to work backwards with some volunteer labor, some local, some out of town. Tried to get that down to the 1.6, 1.8 range. Okay, that didn't quite go as we had hoped. So we are back to that 2.1 number 3 years ago. So how do we get from 2.1 to 2.9? Well, in the last bullet point, you can kind of see it pretty much explains that. If you read that, in the last year, you may be aware of this or maybe not, but building costs have gone up in the 20 to 25% range. Lumber's up like 3 times what it used to be. So this is, it's not just local to us, it's statewide and really across the nation. So, and then if you couple that with normally building increases are 3 to 5%, you add that this last year of 20 to 25%, you jump from 2.1 to 2.8, 2.9 pretty fast. Okay, so that's why that's how we got to where we are today. But just know that in the last few sentences here, the point of this, of knowing all this, is that if we try to wait for a better time related to dollars, there isn't really necessarily a better time. In fact, the general contractor is saying right now that steel's going up. If it's not going to be steel this month, it's going to be something else next month. That's what's happening right now. So that's the way we feel at this point. We have to make a decision at some time. Waiting, is that an option? Well, things are likely just going to get worse. In fact, we almost know that they would in terms of costs. So we, the building committee, feel that now's the time, and waiting longer is just going to increase our costs in the long haul. So back to you, Mike.
Thanks. So financial information, and this is obviously of interest to everybody. And I have to note that Russ Habak wrote this all up for us, and he's our financial numbers guy, so I'm going to have to read more than I typically like to. But he couldn't be here today, so I got volunteered. So for those, just a review of the past, in the spring of 2018, we contacted Cornerstone Stewardship Ministry, which is, his name is Jeff Davis, for advice on how to expand a church and how to generate funds that would be the expense of constructing a new worship facility. He met with the leaders of the church at the time, shared his experiences, which has as many experiences with other WELS churches, and he outlined the possible stewardship program for the church to undertake and project a 3-year fund appeal that would generate $500,000 to $900,000, just from his experience. That's sort of the typical. So the decision was made at the time to hire Cornerstone, Jeff Davis, to assist the congregation with a fund appeal that was named A Time to Build. The timeline for the appeal was established August 19th to July 2022, so that's next summer. Members of the Christ Lutheran have pledged over $1.1 million, exceeding higher projections by 20%. So I guess Jeff's advice was spot on. The present is that we have, in the Time to Build account, $940,000. The architect that designed the church has been paid. Cornerstone has been paid out of those funds. Membership pledges received to date is $850,000, and so we got approximately $250,000 in pledges to remain. So our track record is pretty good. I've been personally involved in other fundraisers for significant projects. This one is a lot more successful than than some of the ones I was involved with. So Time to Build has also received donations from non-members and that did not originally pledge, and also from memorials. Some did, some don't. Some members have actually donated more than they pledged. So the Lord has truly blessed this effort to date. So with the plan of construction activities in the spring of 2021, the project team, we contacted Jeff again, hadn't talked to him for about a year, and said, you know, what do you think? We began discussions with him, and he was very much in support of going forward. We also have reached out to the Church Extension Fund, which is a financing arm of the Wells, to begin discussions on financing the project. Financial information has been shared with them so that initial steps in securing financing can begin. They have been informed that our congregation still needs to do final approval of this, so we're sort of working in parallel with them. The loan, the current mortgage rate to finance a new church is between 4 and 5%. Length of the mortgage would be 25 years. The loan would require interest-only payments for the first year, and then after we're complete with the first year and complete with our project, then we need to do monthly with interest payments. The timing, they meet once a month, so May 20th is the next time they're meeting. So that sort of influenced the schedule that we're having with sharing information and moving towards a voters meeting to hopefully approve. So future, the current project costs are currently estimated between 2.6 and 2.9. It depends on the day we're talking about it, but because a lot of decisions are being evaluated. With funds currently on hand, about $900,000, and commitments outstanding of about $250,000, to be financed would be somewhere between $1,450,000 to $1,750,000. So what that means is a mortgage of that amount at that current interest rate, length of term outlined by Christ CEF, would result in an additional 25% weekly offerings or monthly offerings from our membership to support a monthly mortgage payment of $10,100. Now that's without the next paragraph is the project team. As we've been talking with Jeff Davis, and he highly suggests that we proceed, and we plan to implement a follow-up debt reduction plan. Again, very common. He shared several experiences that other churches have done that with great success. So he gave us some professional advice that we can expect to receive approximately 70 to 80% of what we received, the 1.1 million, the first fundraiser. We're estimating that if we can get a goal of $600,000 to $800,000 for that effort, that would help obviously reduce the mortgage, and that would be obviously a good thing. We're also considering seeking member loans that would reduce the mortgage amount and pay interest to the members at a lesser rate than the mortgage requires. We haven't formalized that yet, but that's part of our discussion. We also assume that the church budget obviously will need to be increased beginning 2022 and following years to include the mortgage payments, whatever that final amount might be. So then the amount needed will obviously be dependent on the success of the debt reduction campaign and members' loans received. So that's that. At this point, I'd like to open it up for questions. And Randy Block is here as well. So Randy's the chair of our building committee, and obviously Larry knows a lot. So either one of you gentlemen want to answer?
Well, let's question so everybody can hear it. It's a supply chain issue is what you're referring to. That
people are having just on simple things
right.
that they're doing in bigger ones. They start a project, and then all of a sudden you get to a certain point, well, they can't get this, and they wait weeks, months, trying to get those parts.
Okay. And that's a good question, because that is what's happening right now. I think, from what I know, and maybe Randy can add to this, Deliriers and other bigger contractors, they buy, if they buy in plywood, they buy it by the train load, not the whole train load, but a train car. They buy in really large quantities, and they get it at a good price, number one, and then they have the materials available. So that I think that eases some of that. They can keep things going pretty good, probably better than a local home contractor here, because they're relying on Boone's or Lampert's, you know.
I'm just saying
So
in terms of, okay, you can't get the plumbing part, well, that means you can't put the wall up, so you have the plumbing. That,
right, and they're I don't know if you can add to that, Randy, but I think that could happen. But I think they have a pretty tight rein on their subs who know where they're at in terms of timing and materials and getting things.
my concern with that is, if we have a delay, does that push the cost up?
It could. It's an if, and we don't know. But what they want to do is, if we get voter approval, they're going to immediately start purchasing some of this stuff well ahead of time for that reason. And they've mentioned that before. It's like they're eager to get the foot on the gas so that they can minimize any of these kind of issues. If that answers your question, it's a good question. Randy?
That's why we decided to hire a professional construction management, general contractor, theater company. They have suppliers that they work with on a regular basis, and they assured us that they're in working with some of the largest or the two largest lumber suppliers in the state. And at first we were going to try and self-manage this, and we thought we could do it, but after thinking about what you're saying, working with Deliriers gave us some pretty good confidence that they have the manpower and the connection with the suppliers to keep our project going.
Any other questions?
Ken?
This structure is going to be demolished. Is there a way to save these beautiful windows and utilize them somehow? Is that thought about?
It has.
Yeah, it has. We've talked to an outfit, a company out of Oshkosh, and he said there isn't that much of a demand for them. Number one, so that unless they're, what did he say? Unless you got.
Utilize it as new structure. That's what I
Yeah. Okay. Pastor Hendrick, actually, what he wants to do is take the symbols out every other window and actually have those then framed and then put up in the new church somewhere. And also we want to take the big shepherd out of the balcony and use that as a focal point. In fact, there it is right there. So that one is something, if we can keep it together,
Yeah.
the intent is to do
That's
that.
all dependent on how gradual it is, if we can get it out without moving.
Yeah. So, boy, that's good timing on that one, because that's actually, I'm looking at it, the sun's right behind it, and that's great, it's bright, and we'd like to have it in there, right in that fellowship area. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other questions? Ken?
We have, I believe, 6 financial institutions in Dutton City limits that we live. They've been contacted as far as interest goes on a large number.
We did, Russ talked to M-Bank, and,
Bank is gone.
well,
What was?
that's where all our accounts are. And then I think there was outreach to Nicolay, is that how you say that, Nicolay? But there's some parameters of the church extension fund that, even though the interest might be a little bit higher, it's very favorable as time goes on, where if you can't make a payment, they're not gonna go after you quite aggressively as a bank would. And then there was some other, but, I mean, that's just a nice cushion, or,
I think you ought to be contacted. I sit in a city council meetings, and when they are going to have a large loan, they contact all of them, and the spread
Yeah. And that was different than the conversation like a month before that, because it was 3 something that was shared, but something in the market increased it to that new number. Well, yeah. Well, for some reason, like MBank too, they quoted like 3.35 when I first talked to them, and a month or so later, when Russ took over that, it popped up over 4. So I don't know what drives that, but that was what we had experienced. Randy?
Each bank requires its own appraisal, and our appraisal fee just for church extension fund is going to be $6,500 for them to appraise our property. So if we wanted to contact every bank in town, we'd have to pay them all the appraisal fee to proceed forward.
Pastor?
Can I just add one thing? Jeff Davis, who's the founder of that Cornerstone Stewardship Ministry, he recommended looking also at a couple local institutions, which we did, potentially also at Thrivent, and then at Wells Church Extension Fund. And he said if you can get Wells Church Extension Fund, which they don't always even finance for established congregations, sometimes they only will do financing for mission churches, because that's what it is, Church Extension Fund. He said they're almost always the best way to go if you can. And this is what he professionally does for a living. And so we did follow his advice, contacted a few different ones, and the group felt like the Extension Fund was probably the best way to go, especially considering what Randy said about they all require their own appraisals.
Yes.
I understand that the construction companies are out 2 years before they're so busy that they're building 2 years from now, that they can't take on any contractor that's all lined up, that we can go right away.
Yep.
Or do we have to wait?
Can you repeat that? The question is, will the contractor be able to get started right away? Pretty much.
And the answer is yes. They are very anxious. We received a contract for them. A couple of people reviewed it, and we're going to have a meeting with them, I think, next week to negotiate through the terms, and that's going to be after our voters meeting on the 6th. And they're ready to go. And they've been super cooperative with a lot of work that typically you wouldn't get done by them until they saw a signed contract. So we've got somebody that's known, that's proven to be very cooperative with us, because we've been asking, can we get this number down? And they have spent lots of time to try and bring that number down. So I think we're going to be in good hands.
And they are working currently at St. Cunigunda's on Highway 17 in Sugar Camp. So that project manager would actually become ours. He would work back and forth. He's in the area. He'd be right here. So they're, yeah, like Mike said, they're ready to go.
Good, ask him, if he's working there, ask him whether that is a graveyard or a cemetery. There's a difference. There's a difference.
You can stop by there and ask him that, Ken.
Yes.
Earlier in the discussion, there was I don't know, there was a group of people that went around and helped build churches.
Yep. Builders for Christ.
Going to be using them, or were they not available, or?
Contact was made, and they have a lot of requests, and we weren't selected. Don't know why, but we weren't selected. You know, it's a tough decision when they have 100 requests and only can do 20. So,
And yeah, so that was pursued. Also, I think the size of the church, the height is a little bit over.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys are in their 70s doing this. And then they want to park on site. They all come in campers, and the city said no to that. So there was some of these things that actually almost disqualified them right away. But we spent a lot of time pursuing that. Good question, though.
great questions.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, then I'm going to close before we move to the survey or the questionnaire. So obviously this building decision is really a big step for our congregation. We don't know what the future holds, or nor do we have all the answers, especially the financial ones. We do know, however, that our gracious God has blessed the ministry in the past, and we're confident that as we move forward, he will continue to do the same. Just as our founding fathers, who built the current church and later our school, there were many unknowns, and look at what we've enjoyed for years. We are at a similar time in history of Christ Lutheran. So your leaders are taking the bold step, and that's the leaders of the building committee, taking a bold step of trust with confidence that God will bless our plans, and we invite you to do the same as we move forward, and we are at that point that we're prepared to do the work with your approval. So, you have a questionnaire there. It's pretty short and sweet. If you're able to fill it out now, that'd be great, because we do want to collect all this information, feedback from folks, and package it so we can share it with the building committee. If you do feel that you need to have some time to give thought prior to our questions or comments, please get your comments to the church office by email. It's listed there, or in person to our church assistant, Nicole Kubi. We would need that by May 3rd so we can pull things together and be prepared for the voters meeting on May 6th. So with that, appreciate your attendance and attention. And in addition to the yes and no, just if you have any other thoughts that you just want to share as additional comments or questions, please include that under number 3 or 2. Okay. We will be getting new pews. I mean the windows? Oh, the pews. I don't. One of the passages, do you know how that gets handled?
Yeah, there are options. There is a company out of Milwaukee that buys and then sells these sorts of things so that we can dispose of them and maybe also make some money off of them, and they're used for another purpose. We're looking into those options. We're trying to get as much out of this church, both financially and what is usable aesthetically in the new building as we can.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming. Yep, thank you.